Doing a decent video presentation often comes down to practical production matters. A lot of superficial stuff that might not be in common knowledge, but if you just have a few tips and you attend to a few things, it makes a big difference in getting across the material, the content of what you're saying, if you attend to some of the basics of how you are presenting that material. First things first is, quite honestly, the face. Don't underestimate the communicative value of the human face. You create identification, you create humanization by showing your face. Recording a voice underneath slides is a decent option. Sometimes it's your only option, understandably, but it is not ultimately as effective. The ability to make eye contact of sorts with your audience is crucial to driving home your point. If you just have a slide up and you are a amorphous voice underneath it, that can convey some content. There's going to be some help with the verbal cues, with the tone of voice, the pacing, stuff like that you can use to make an impression. But always remember that your face is often the most powerful tool. As human beings, we are naturally more keyed visually than we are auditorially. That's what we are. We're apex predators that way. But if we attend to it just a little bit, if we take the effort to show our faces, that can convey a lot of what we're trying to say and do so much of what we are making the presentation for. So whenever possible, show your face. Don't just record underneath the slides. Do a video presentation where you are following along with the slides, and then perhaps, and technology is evolving with this very quickly, you can click back and forth as you're recording and bring in the slides and take them back out to show the face, or you can come back and edit the whole thing afterwards, which is what I tend to do because it's greater control. But don't underestimate the ability to bring back your face. Sometimes that means leaving across the slides entirely. That doesn't mean that you can't have text on the screen. With most editing platforms, software, applications, whatever, you can put in headlines across the bottom, perhaps over to the side. Have some options available so that you're not just losing the face for something that is otherwise not all that critical to show data, to show numbers, to show important points on the screen that you want to drive home, but you're bringing in the face strategically to make those points emphasized. A lot of issues also come up with, frankly, just simple camera stuff. The cameras on I'm recording this on my MacBook, and it's a very conventional camera. I do have a exterior microphone that I paid a few extra bucks for. Not terribly expensive, but it does make a remarkable difference in the audio quality. And for everything that I'm saying about the visual, the audio is also very important. And if a voice is very tinny or very scratchy, or you can barely hear it because it's so overmodulated, then nobody's going to want to hear, nobody's going to want to listen, nobody's going to want to pay attention, and that's going to detract from your message because your audience will be thinking, good God, is that what he sounds like? Instead of following what you're saying. But framing matters. Framing creates comfort. Framing establishes a relationship with your viewer. Framing is a question of how are you presenting yourself to another human being. It's the same thing as when you are meeting someone, quite frankly. When you meet someone for the first time, let's say, maybe at a party or an event or whatever, you're used to engaging on a certain equilibrium. Not necessarily right up front in front of them, because that's just way too close, but also not leaning back and telegraphing that, whoa, I'm kind of wary of you. You look scary. But you present yourself in an even-handed way, right up front, very close, but not too close, and in an engaged manner, perhaps leaning forward a little, like I am now. And the framing itself is fairly loose around me, but it's good for presentation. The the most frequent mistake with framing comes in people who just take their laptop, perhaps, or their whatever they're recording on, put it on a table, and then sit over it. Having a low angle shot gives you a really clear and disturbing view right up my nostrils, but also think about the positioning of this. You are literally looking down on your audience as you're speaking, and your audience is sitting there, and it's kind of imposing, kind of scary to see this figure looming over them. It's just very uncomfortable. So whenever possible, do not do this. This is scary. This is disturbing. This makes your audience just a little bit uncomfortable enough to unplug from what you're saying. And that's when you lose them. You're never getting them back. So whenever possible, put your camera, put your laptop, put whatever you're shooting on up a little higher at eye level so that we are engaging face to face. Nobody wants to be spoken down to. Nobody wants to feel weird. Nobody wants to have to make this mental leap as to how they are supposed to react to. You want to have maximum connection with your audience. The framing in a portrait mode will radically change how your image is received, how it's interpreted. Your audience is automatically going to have a different reaction to you. It's got, there are the lines. It's too narrow so that there end up being lines on either side. It tends to stretch everything out. And if you'd want to put a slide on there, you're going back and forth between these two different angles, and the slide will end up very small and it's very difficult to see. And it's just not how the people who are evaluating you, your bosses and your professors, it's not how they are perceived, or it's not how they are comfortable perceiving information. This might change, it probably will change over time, but if you have this portrait mode, it's just not professional. Having some thought as to how this is going to be seen, how this is going to be absorbed, consumed by your audience, shows that you are thinking about your audience. You are not making this just for you. You're not making this just because, well, this is what I thought to do, and you got to catch up with me. That is not the point. You have to think in terms of what your audience will be more comfortable with, and then you do the work to make that happen. Along with framing, basic considerations of lighting. Again, this is not complicated cinematography here. I have a couple of light sources going on here. Nothing special, nothing particularly complicated. I have one small light over there. I have another one over there, and I have a little bit of a light back there. This is lighting up my face. It's providing a little bit of shadow here, so I look like a human being, and not just, washed out. It is comfortable. I'm not backlit by anything terribly bright. The shades behind me are drawn so that there's not a lot of sunlight coming in, and so my face stays lit up. One of the problems with most shooting on a laptop or most screen-based cameras is that the iris is automatic, and if it is suddenly a really bright light behind you, everything else in the image gets darkened so that the camera can absorb the image in total, and it will key off the brightest light that it sees. Right now, this is probably keying off that lamp behind me, which is a little bit bright, is a little bit harsh, but it's a very minor part of the image, so it's not all that distracting. But if it was suddenly a big bright light behind me, which I do have back there, but I'm not turning on, I use it when I want to read, not when I'm recording, that shuts down my face entirely and you can't see anything. And again, those little things that make a difference. This also comes into play when you are shooting down low and you have a perhaps ceiling lamp behind you and you get this weird halo effect where you see this enshadowed face staring down at you talking, and behind everything is glaring white. That is distracting. That is actually very ugly, and I would encourage you to not do that ever. It is uncomfortable to watch, quite frankly. Posture. Consider posture, your own physical posture. Right now, you see me. I am leaning forward just a little bit. I'm a little bit away from the wall behind me, but you can see that I am upright, I am engaged, I am interested. Basic presentation stuff. If I were to be just sort of slumping into the chair over here, I kind of look like I'm dead. You don't want to make that impression. You want to have your audience assume that you are interested enough in what you're saying and interested enough in their understanding what you're saying, your audience understanding what you're saying, that you are leaning in, that you are engaged, that you are fully present for this presentation. If you start leaning back, if you just start, that is not socially productive, let's say. Another aspect of the posture, I would say, it's more of a setting issue. Don't do it up against a wall. Right now, you can see a lot of junk behind me, and it's kind of messy and crowded. I don't have, a lot of space to work with here, but this is where I'm comfortable. So this is what I'm doing here. In your own home, maybe you have that, maybe you don't, and I understand logistically not everybody's going to have the perfect little nook to do this kind of project, and that's understandable. Grading on a curve there. But for the most part, don't do it up against a wall where you're flat up against a wall and it's suddenly very claustrophobic. You'll look a little bit like you're in a police lineup, and it just looks crowded and cramped. And this will psychologically have an effect on your audience, who might start to feel a little anxious, like, geez, there's nowhere to go. That is crucial. Another aspect of pushing yourself up against a wall and having very cramped spaces, perhaps, to record is the audio. Again, whenever possible, try and do it in a comfortable setting that is not too echoey. Quite frankly, not too many hard surfaces around you that are going to just repel sound waves. If you do it in a room with a lot of marble, then you're going to have some echo in there. Kitchens can be really dicey if you're doing this from home. Find some place where your voice can sound normal. And you can do this in just about any setting, quite frankly. If you go somewhere and you say, wow, this is a really beautiful room, I want to do it here, and then just try speaking in a normal voice and listen to what it sounds like. And if you find yourself wanting to swallow your voice just a little bit and bring it down to a real low level, that probably means that there's an echo in the room and you don't want to have that. You can deal with that in a lot of little ways. If you have a little bit of an echo and you have no choice of where to go, you throw a bunch of very plush blankets or coats or something just out of frame, like on the floor or maybe even in your lap, and that will help absorb some of the sound. Little things like that. That's a trick that, quite frankly, you see on movie sets all the time. It just helps dampen some of that echo effect and make those hard surfaces softer so they're not bouncing back all those sound waves. Little things like that have an effect because, again, you'll start to distract your audience with these little quirks of your presentation so that they're focusing more on how you're saying what you're saying versus what you're saying. And you want to pay attention to how you're saying what you're saying. You want your audience to follow exclusively what you're saying. Otherwise, you're just showing off. When it comes to slides are very important. And if you're going to be using slides, and I encourage the use of slides, again, bring them in, taking them out at judicious times so that it's not just up there forever. But a few basic principles of slide composition, I think, are significant. When you are giving a presentation, don't just read what is on the slide. The slide is meant to be bullet pointed, not just have a literal transcription of every word out of your mouth, because what is the point of listening to you when you can just read it on the slide? There is no value added if you're just reading the slide. Much better is to have bullet points. Much better is to have a title up top, a couple of bullet points perhaps, maybe some images, a graph, a chart, a graphic of some kind, a picture, anything to help take advantage of the actual visual dimension of what you are saying. The words are not always that effective in communicating. Pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You've heard that one, but pictures really make an impression. And they give you something to talk about while you are doing a presentation. If you're just reading a script and there's just those words up on the screen, there's nothing to really elaborate on that you can follow along with. But if you have some bullet points on a screen along with an image, a chart, or something like that, then you can pause in the middle of a presentation and say, well, now look at this chart, or look at this image. Let's take a look at this. Let's just go through this one by one. Look at how this number changes from this to that over this period of time, and you can see the progression, you can see the trend, and then you are off, because then people are engaged because they are listening to what you're saying, they're looking at the screen, they're getting the information from the screen and thinking about it on their own. They're following you along with what they're saying, and they're maybe developing questions, and there may be objections. But they are engaged. They are thinking with you. They are in the process of making meaning, which is how you make an impression, quite frankly, how you make an effective presentation. The other end of that spectrum of too much going on the slide is not enough. If you just have a headline and then you're just talking and talking and talking underneath it with nothing new to look at on the screen, then there's no reason for there to be a screen at all. Give them something to look at and have it change with some frequency. Look at the image. Take an objective view of whatever slide you're putting out there. Look at the information in the text, in the images, in the graphs, and the graphics, and the design in general, and say, well, okay, how long does it take for me to absorb all of the information that's on there? And then you got to use that as your game plan, quite frankly, because you don't want to just say, all right, I'm going to put this up there and I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm going to talk about a whole lot of stuff that's loosely affiliated with what's on the screen, but not necessarily explicitly connected to that. And your audience is going to start to say, well, I'm listening, but I'm not hearing any, or I'm not seeing any connection to what I'm hearing, so maybe I don't really need to look at it anymore. So, okay, I'm going to continue to listen, but I'm going to just pick up my phone and start scrolling through it. Because I'm listening, sure, but now I'm looking somewhere else. Because as a member of the new media generation of the 21st century, I need constant visual stimulation. I need to be constantly refreshed with something new. and you've lost them by then, because they'll say they're listening, but they're not, obviously. You need to keep a regular progression of things coming up, not just the same thing over and over and over sitting there. Variety helps. Variety in content, variety in design. Each slide should look a little different from the previous one. And take advantage of that opportunity so that if you have a simple slide, terrific. A good slide, quite frankly, often has one main point that it's trying to make. And you make that point with that slide, but then you move on to another one. So if you have a lot of information that you need everybody to focus on, break that up into multiple slides. Don't have a slide with a dozen different bullet points on it. It's too much. Nobody's going to remember anything. But if you take that one slide and say, okay, I'm going to do a dozen bullet points, but each one is going to get its own slide. I'm going to have an introductory slide, and then I'm going to click through all of these different slides. Or perhaps I can subcategorize them. Maybe I can group them, chunk them in different ways so that I can do just like 3 bullet points on each slide, and then have a different category for the next group and the next group after that. And then pretty soon you are giving your audience chunked information so that it's not just loose bits of fluff flying at them, but whole ideas that they're being asked to consume steadily and progressively. And that helps your audience. And again, the purpose of a presentation is to make your audience understand something. So here you got to think in terms of how they are really going to absorb that material. What is really going to be effective? Is it going to be with a lot of stuff on the screen at the same time, or just spoon feeding a little bit at a time? It might seem condescending, it might seem cheesy, but just a little bit at a time. That is how we as human beings absorb information, quite frankly. We don't really do very well drinking from a fire hose. Give it to us one step at a time. Don't neglect basic aesthetics within that either. Give a little thought to design of your slides. I said a few minutes ago, try and have some variety, and one slide next to another should be a little different. Having a visual continuity helps, like a color scheme or something like that. And most of the publicly available slide apps, I'm thinking of PowerPoint and Google Slides and what have you. Most of them have like, okay, you're going to do this, and they're going to give you some varieties within that. And you just click next slide, and one that's going to be slightly different pops up. And that's good. But take a look at them in general and say, all right, what really works and what works with my material? If I'm doing something really fun, you don't want to have a really severe design up there. Or if I'm doing something that is really, serious, if I'm talking about childhood leukemia, I don't want to have, clowns and happy stuff going on there. You gotta design it to have a right tone. It can't be off. Take a little bit of effort to attend to that. Make it look nice. And just consider some specifics too. One of the more popular designs on Google Slides, I think it's one of the first ones that come up, has this really, really kind of ugly, cheesy parallelogram design up in the corner, and then against a black screen. And that's okay, but think about the effect of staring at a black screen for 10, maybe even 15 minutes. Black is a very dark and depressing color. And if people are looking at that much black, even if there are words and images on it, but if the background and if the overall dynamic of the image has too much black in it, and that's a judgment call, I agree, But if there's a lot of black in it, it's going to be kind of hard to look at. It's going to be kind of ugly. It's going to be kind of depressing after a little while. Don't make that mistake. Make it look nice in some way or another. Also, basics, grammatical and spelling errors. If you have a typo in your slide, that means you didn't care enough about this presentation to just proofread it a little. Just a last pass. All right, let me just take a look at this. Accidents happen. Everybody knows these things happen. But when you put up a typo on the slide and you're giving a presentation in front of people, they are no longer thinking, well, makes a good point. They're thinking, is that really how you spell that? Let me Google it. Let me see. I can do this subtly here. Oh, that's not right. Or, is that really how you're supposed to use a semicolon? Little questions like that start to arise, and once they do arise, you've lost your audience. They're gone. You're not going to be able to get them back, and that's a shame. So, proofread. Grammatical, spelling errors, no good. Fix them early on if possible. In general, also, frame your presentation. Have a beginning, have an ending. Have a beginning, middle, and ending. Aristotle. Do an executive summary at the beginning. Lots of effective people I know who are very good at presentations insist on this. Say, give a summation at the start and say, okay, I'm very happy to be here today. I'm here to talk about X. Let me just say, today we are going to be discussing boom, boom, boom. We're going to go over this point, we're going to go over this point, we're going to go over this point, and let's go through the details right now. Number one, and then you're off to the races. Give them that little way to orient themselves. And it also functions as a tease. It gives them a sense of, oh, okay, what's coming up? Ooh, I want to pay attention for that. As opposed to you just start off and it might not be something that they're particularly interested in offhand. And they're just going to tune out entirely, assuming that you're not providing anything that they want. But if you tell them that, okay, yeah, we're going to be talking about this and then we're going to be talking about this, they're going to clue into that and they're going to say, well, all right, maybe I'll pay attention at the beginning too, but I really want to get to that other thing and I want to be, paying attention when that comes up. I don't want to miss it. So you don't miss anything by providing just a slide at the beginning, just take a moment and say, we're going to be dealing with this. This is the conclusion that I have drawn after doing my research, so to speak, and the conclusion comes first. And then at the end, you have an actual conclusion. You have walked them through your information. You have walked them through a vast field of data, perhaps. And it's a lot to absorb. And, as human beings, we forget stuff. I don't really remember very much. What was I saying? These things are hard to retain. So you help your audience out just a little bit. And you remind them at the end with a summation, a closing argument, perhaps, just a takeaway. What does all this mean? I've been talking for the last 10 to 15 minutes. I've thrown an awful lot at you, but let's zoom back to 15,000 feet and take a look at the big picture. What this means is, boom, your takeaway. Give them something to remember specifically at the end. Don't trust that they're going to remember everything from the beginning. They're probably not. But give them something. It can be a couple of things, but give them something to remember. A way of shifting all of the information that they've been taking in and shifting it into a category, shifting it into a context that they can grasp and that they can utilize, that they can take and say, all right, now I understand I understand the context for this information, so now I can do something with it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to want your audience to have that feeling that they can do something with your information. Certainly, your audience wants that, because otherwise they're just listening to you because you're talking, and nobody really likes doing that. But if they know that what you're talking about, the information that you are communicating, if they know that has purpose for them, that is useful to them, then they're on board and you've got them. You've given them something valuable. That is what communication is all about, providing your audience with something of value and understanding that and giving it to them in a way that can be absorbed as much as possible. Basic pedagogy there, but also appreciated. Give them those tools. If you can do that, if you can put all of that together with all of the complicated technical stuff that's going on, then you have a good presentation. It doesn't take an awful lot of complicated materials. I am doing this, as I said, on a MacBook. I got, very ordinary lighting going on. I have one very small microphone that is not particularly expensive. And I'm going to be cutting this. I'm going to be editing it after the fact, after I recorded this. I'm recording on QuickTime, which came with my MacBook. I'm going to be editing it on iMovie, which came with my MacBook. I have another editing software that I do most of my stuff on, but I'm doing this as a little presentation thing because iMovie is free with the MacBook. But these things can be done with most facilities at your disposal. And the nature of technology is that it is always evolving. There is always something new coming out, and you can always find new ways to do things. So don't just settle for, well, I just recorded my voice under some slides because that's what I found online. Well, okay, but how much did you look online? Probably not that much. If you just get in the habit of Googling, how to do a presentation, what are the good tools out there? What's a good app? Get some ideas, see what is out there, and then pretty soon you can start playing. Then you can start assembling all your materials, developing some slides, putting out a video, maybe working with sound and having all sorts of other things going on. And you can then sit down and pay attention to the process of producing a video. And then that makes the impression as well. Your audience will be sitting there saying, wow, yeah, that's really interesting information that is coming at me in a refreshingly new and creative way. Your boss or your professor is also having these considerations, but also thinking, yeah, that information is really interesting. But more interesting than that is the fact that this person went out and found all of these and found a creative way to convey this information, to communicate this information effectively. That's someone I want on my team. That's someone I'm going to promote. That's somebody I'm going to give a raise to. That's someone I want ready to go out and be the face of my organization because they take the time to present it properly. That's when the takeaway for you is a little attention to production details in a video presentation means more money for me.